So let's get stuck into our first debate. Should the government subsidise housing for the under 30s? Now, this comes off the bat. Lettings agents Hamptons have issued a stark warning to young adults. They're basically saying if you haven't already bought a property, you may end up having to rent for the rest of your life. Millennials, those are born between 1980 and 1994, currently dominate the rental market. Higher mortgage rates have kept them renting for much, much longer and have pushed up the renting bills. So do you think that the government should step in and give them a hand? Darryl, what do you think? Is it for the government to be helping people with their living costs?
I think there comes a point in a crisis where they do, and I think this is also.
So is this a crisis?
I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it is one of the great crises of our times. I think is the fact that we simply do not have enough housing stock for a start, which is obviously a big problem. We also have older generations living in houses that are perhaps better suited to families, one or two people living in a house that could be fit for three or four where they need it. And the bedroom tax was a really horrible way of trying to address that problem.
That is a bit historic.
Well,
you are going back a long way there.
Is it
10 years
that long ago? It's not, is it? Oh, God, that feels like yesterday.
That was up to you.
That was the thing. But yeah, I think at some point, absolutely. Yeah, I think there needs to be a big market correction here. And I also think that we have to be finding ways to encourage this generation onto the housing ladder. Otherwise, they will own nothing. I mean, we stream all of our music, we stream our films, we rent cars, and we rent property. They're going to turn around at 35 and realise they've amassed no capital whatsoever in their lifetime.
Maybe that's the future.
I really hope
nobody
not.
owns anything.
I really hope
that's not good for your politics.
I think that owning a house, owning a property, doesn't have to be a house, something, is so important for your place in the world and your feeling about your ability to build a solid base, to have a family, all of those things. Hugely important. And it is on this government that we are in the rental crisis we are. It isn't just that they've utterly, abjectly failed to build anywhere near enough homes. It is also the ludicrous regulations that are now put on landlords, which mean that a load of landlords are leaving the market. All the tick box exercise, the expensive things that you have to put in properties now. Of course, we all want properties to be safe and decent. They must be. But some of the stuff is just insane. I recently bought a very little place which has got some kind of energy rating of E or F or something, which means it's unrentable. There's absolutely nought wrong with it. It's a top floor place which needs renovation and it's probably pretty cosy. I don't know why it's got an E regulation, but it will mean that I've got to go through a whole load of hoops to put it up to a standard of climate change efficiency that mean it can be rented out. This is why we've got such a problem as we have. So it's not the government should not be subsidising rents. It should be correcting the things that are causing the rents to go sky high.
Is that, though, not a solution to the problem that we have, in that we have too many landlords who are holding on to housing stock? And with all due respect, maybe you're part of the problem. Maybe actually the harder it is for you to lease that place out, to rent that place out, the more likely you are to put it back onto the market and it becomes available.
Well, I think that's probably absolutely right. It's not me that's part of the problem, though. It is the government red tape and regulations that make it unattractive to let properties out. And I'm afraid that Labour would make this a great deal worse. I mean, in fact, the Tories have just, I think, stepped back from the brink on a ludicrous proposal to introduce so-called ban on no-fault evictions, which effectively means that if you let your property out as a landlord, you've got no way of ever reclaiming it. I mean, no landlord's going to go into it on that basis.
OK, what about the fact that when you look into house prices, when you look back in the early 60s, late 50s, the amount of money you needed to put together in order to buy a house was 2.5 times, 3.5 times.
Right. Much more realistic.
Your annual income. I mean, I have it here. One of the surveys was saying that even not that far back in 1997, that's not that long ago, 3.5 times your annual salary to buy a house. Now we're at almost 10 times your salary.
It's completely insane and it's so unfair.
So with that in mind then, Isabel, doesn't the government have a duty to help people who are under 30 to somehow either get on the rent on the ladder, on the property ladder, or give them help with their rental incomes. The rental incomes have gone through the roof.
For the reasons that I described. Look, there are schemes, a shared ownership, which is a start. It is a better than nothing situation. But we're only going to get out of this problem if you address the supply-demand mismatch. That is at the root of it. It is simply a supply-demand imbalance.
Can I pick you up on the point you made about regulation making it harder for people to rent?
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, nobody wants to sort of regulate a market out of existence or regulate people out of a market. We should have perhaps a better, I think we could all probably agree we want a more natural way of this being corrected. But is it not that we have it probably has become far too easy for a certain group of people and a certain generation to amass the capital of this housing stock, to rent it, to reduce availability to millennials and Gen Zers, and then force them into a life of rental. And actually, we need to make it less attractive for people to be owning and renting properties, do we not?
It sounds almost like a bit of a conspiracy theory there, that the landlords, the rich of this world are trying to make it more and more difficult for anybody to buy somewhere so that they can hold on to the high rent yields. I'm not buying that. I don't think. Well, no,
I think that's perfectly reasonable. People have spotted an opportunity to make some money, and that's the way that
If you talk to landlords right now, most of them are thinking about. Well, I'm not going to say most. A great deal of them are thinking of getting the hell out.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to go back just briefly. I know that Joanne's waiting to speak to us, but just to get your thoughts, just for a moment, you were talking about how important it is to own something.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at other...
thing. I mean,
it is a British thing, because I look at... my other half, they're in German family. This idea that you must own your home is very alien. In Greece, where I come from, again, only the super wealthy were able to actually own their homes, and actually to be renting is not thought of, I can't put my roots down. No, everybody rents. Is that something that perhaps needs to change in this country, this idea that you must get on the property ladder?
It's a cultural thing, and there are definitely upsides to renting. I mean, we rent in London, and when there's a problem, it's not our problem, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And you've also got the ability to try different areas and move around.
OK. Let's have a listen to what people are saying at home. Joanne in Lancashire. Joanne, good afternoon. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think that there should be some sort of assistance for younger people, but not with paying rent. I think there should be some sort of savings. So, for example, if they saved 20,000, the government matches it towards a deposit for a property. But to actually help with renting, no, I don't agree with that at all.
How on earth are people supposed to save £20,000? I mean,
No, it was just an example, 10,000, 5,000, whatever. But as long as they can manage to save something and the government could match it.
Matched savings would be very expensive.
I can hear Jeremy Hunt right now sort of putting his fingers in his ears going, oh, no. That sounds very expensive. But Joanne, is it important for people to try and get on the property ladder? As we were just saying just before you came on, perhaps we just need to change our attitudes. Perhaps it is going to be the case that actually getting on the property ladder should not be that big priority. Actually renting, and perhaps if you are renting for the rest of your life, it's not that bad.
Well, if you think about it, if you're renting and then you retire, you've still got to pay rent.
Yes.
If you've bought your own property.
That's also true.
So in a sense, we're kind of saying maybe the government help should be on the other end, not the under 30s. Maybe when you've retired, and maybe that's where you need your help.
I mean, the best help anyone's going to get is bluntly from their parents. So maybe we should stop taxing parents when they want to leave their homes to their children, to the point that the property has to be sold.
Well, that affects a very, very small number of people. A very, very small number of people. It actually does.
It doesn't. I mean, most properties now.
Was it 6%?
Most properties are now worth over 365,000, aren't they? 325,000. How many properties are there that are worth a lot less than that? I mean...
Joanne, thank you. Let's move and hear from Steve, who's in Leeds. Steve, good afternoon. What would you like to say, Steve?
Hi, yes, I think there should be a subsidy for the under 30s, but it should be in the form of what used to be called council houses.
Yes.
That was effectively subsidised housing. Yes. When I was born and raised in council houses, I've never known such a safe, secure, stable house where loads of kids were raised, and they've all gone on to, be productive members of society.
But then, Steve, we go back to what Darryl was saying, is that we've had such a low number of council houses being built that it's just not realistic to say to under 30s, we're going to give you a nice council house, we're going to put you in there, we're going to help you, that's going to be affordable, in line with what you're earning. It's just not possible because we haven't built enough.
Well, then the solution is to build enough, isn't it? Surely.
I think I've lost count of the amount of governments that have come in to say...
Every single one.
Including Labour governments, they've come in to say we're going to build more council houses, and it's just not happening. Mostly because, and if you look at the graphs at the moment of who's building houses, you see this huge shift from the late 50s and the 60s into government building houses, and now it's predominantly private companies building houses, and they want to build them for profit. They're not building them out of the kindness of their hearts.
Well, what's happened is through the 80s, essentially, housing was privatised. Like everything else got privatised. It just never got called privatisation.
OK. Steve, thank you. Council houses. Let's speak to Anne in Norfolk. Anne, how would you solve this problem? Help for the under 30s, or maybe help for maybe when you grow older? Maybe that's when you need the help.
I don't think there is a solution. I think because we English are obsessed with owning property, owning cars, and yet we were a country that had council properties we could all use, and then we were given permission to buy them. Well, of course, the council property in those days was nothing like the cost of a house today.
Yep.
So everybody straight away jumped on the wagon. My father was offered our house, a 3-bedroom house, for £3,000.
Wow.
He didn't have the money to pay for it. But we rented. Now, of course, I don't know what it is, but we are obsessed. Why can't we follow other countries that seem to rent extremely well? The Germans do it.
You do have that, but then you also do have a large section of that society, because I know it's the same in Greece as well, who basically own all the properties, a small section, and other people are paying them off. Usually they own them outright. Darryl, there is a thought sometimes, and I think that's where quite a lot of people have said, well, actually renting is a waste of money because you get left with nothing at the end of it. Tied into the fact that perhaps someone who can't actually afford to buy an entire house, they put a down payment, they put a renter in there to pay their mortgage, so you've basically effectively bought a house for someone else. Is that part of the problem?
You've helped somebody else amass capital, haven't you?
Yeah.
I think it's about, I think there's two ways of looking at this. There's the sort of capitalist idea and sort of free market idea, and there is redistribution of wealth, isn't there, in this as well? And that our housing stock shouldn't be, I think that we should be able to, as a society, decide that our housing stock shouldn't be in the hands of a small number of people. I think you should have fair access, and actually that is both redistribution of assets, and it's also quite capitalist, isn't it? Because the ability to amass capital to buy a house is a sort of fundamental. And what you're also seeing, by the way.
He's so reasonable, isn't he? This is the problem with you. You're actually sounding really reasonable. I'm finding myself veering over. You should be on that side, veering off.
You've done it, Darryl. You've done it.
I would also say that this is probably a crisis for your politics, because what you're also seeing.
It's not a crisis for my politics, because I believe in aspiration and opportunity.
I know.
That's the important.
I know. I recognise that entirely. But what I'm saying is that Gen Zers and millennials are less likely to vote Conservative. As they get older, they are becoming less Conservative. And there's a clear reason for that. It's because they're not amassing capital. When you vote Conservative to protect largely your capital. There's lots of other things involved, of course.
Okay.
But they don't have any to do, any to protect.
Let's squeeze in Catherine, because she's been waiting a long time to speak to us. Catherine in Sheffield. Catherine, good afternoon. What would you like to say, Catherine?
Just that I believe it shouldn't be just for the under 30s. It should be for all the generation. As I said to your producer, I've got 2 children. One that's in the 30s who's in rented. My son, he's only just bought his first house last year. It's part ownership.
Yeah.
And there's no way really that he'll be able to buy the other part, because every year it goes up.
Right.
So they're paying a mortgage, and plus they're paying rent for this part share.
So you think that
they've all got good jobs. The teachers, my son works for the government. So yeah, I think it's just
Yeah. So you're saying that they should extend it beyond 30s, what, to people under 40, people under... I mean, where do you stop?
People under 40, well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Because the reality is, as we discussed, we're now talking about, in order to buy a house, they generally cost about between 7 and 10 times what you will earn in a year. It's almost impossible to accrue that.
People can't afford the deposit.
Yeah. Catherine, thank you. Thank you all for your calls on this. Something I think we're going to be coming back to, because maybe we do need to change the way we think. Maybe rental is the way forward. And actually the importance of owning a property is going to be lessened the more people can't afford to get on the property ladder.